Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really opening up the files on a military unit that was, well, pretty revolutionary for its time. So disciplined, so uniquely motivated. It basically redefined warfare in its era.
Yeah, even though it only lasted, less than half a century.
Exactly. We're talking about the Sacred Band of Thebes, the legendary Hieros Lochos, and their story. It's this incredible mix of battlefield skill, philosophical ideas, and something really profound, institutionalized love.
It really is a spectacular convergence, isn't it? Culture and military doctrine smashing together. We're looking at one of history's most potent examples of, leveraging deep personal, emotional commitment for tactical advantage.
For 40 years, just 40 short years, 378 BCE to 308 BCE.
Right, that specific window.
The Sacred Band was the living embodiment of Theban power, and their rise and fall, it perfectly mirrors the twilight of classical Greek liberty itself.
You can trace the whole arc, really.
Yeah.
Theban ascendancy, their brief moment at the top, and then the collapse. It's all tied up in the story of these 300 men.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. To really get why the Sacred Band even existed, we need to set the stage. We're in the 4th century BCE.
And it's not a stable time. Not at all. Definitely not settled empires.
Yeah.
It was a period of, intense instability. The big one, the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta, had wrapped up. Sparta technically won, but that peace, it basically shattered immediately.
Right. The decades right after the Peloponnesian War were all about what historians call shifting hegemonies. No single polis, no city-state could really hold on to dominance for long.
Sparta was overstretched.
Hugely overstretched, and frankly deeply resented by many other Greek states. So this created a kind of power vacuum, and that allowed new players to rise up fast. Thebes was maybe the most surprising challenger.
Geographically well placed, I suppose?
Yeah, good location, and they led the Boeotian League, which was a pretty powerful regional alliance. But, and this is key, they still lacked that systemic military edge you saw in a place like Sparta. So Thebes needed to challenge Sparta, the big dog on the block. But their standard army setup, the usual citizen hoplite levy, it just wasn't going to cut it against Spartans who trained their whole lives.
No way. They needed an equalizer. Something different.
And that need, that specific problem, leads directly to the Sacred Band.
Precisely. That Theban ascendancy, that 40-year period we mentioned, 378 to 338 BCE, it lines up exactly with the lifespan of the Sacred Band.
Yeah.
It was their strategic solution, their answer to needing an elite professional fighting force.
Professional being the key word there, different from the usual citizen soldier.
Absolutely. Think about Sparta. They had the helots, the state-owned serfs doing all the farming and labor.
Yeah.
That freed up Spartan citizens for basically lifelong military training from childhood. Thebes didn't have that system.
Right.
So they needed a unit that was professional, consistently trained, deeply motivated, but without having to completely overhaul their whole society like Sparta did.
And that necessity, as they say, was the mother of invention, or in this case, the mother of the Hieros Lochos.
Okay, let's talk structure, because this is where Thebes just went completely off the map for ancient warfare.
It was radical, totally radical, the core structure. 300 men, carefully chosen, elite warriors. But here's the twist. They were organized specifically into 150 pairs of male couples.
Wow.
They fought as heavy infantry, hoplites, the backbone of the phalanx. But the unit's whole operational idea, its doctrine, was built on the belief that the deep loyalty between lovers was the single greatest psychological weapon you could have on a battlefield.
So it wasn't just finding the best fighters and hoping they bonded. The state actually formalized this specific type of relationship,
Institutionalized it.
expecting it to produce better soldiers, superior martial arreto or virtue.
That's exactly it. And this move towards professionalization itself, it's a massive historical signpost. We usually credit the founding of the band to the Theban leader Gorgidas, around 378 BCE.
Gorgidas, he set them up as a standing troop. Professional soldiers. Now think about what that means for a classical Greek polis. These 300 men, they were taken out of the regular economy.
Not farming, not making pottery.
Nope. They were fully supported, paid, provisioned by the state, year-round. That level of state investment in a standing unit, very, very rare back then. It signaled a huge commitment to military power. It kind of anticipates the fully professional armies we see later in the Hellenistic period, like with Alexander.
But Gorgidas, the founder,
Right.
you mentioned he was initially a bit cautious about how he used them. Why not just unleash this elite force right away?
Well, Gorgidas clearly knew how good they were, elite skill. But he also understood basic math. 300 guys, no matter how amazing, can get swallowed up pretty easily in a big battle against thousands.
Makes sense.
So his first strategy was, let's say, conservative. He actually spread the members of the Sacred Band throughout the front ranks of the regular Theban phalanxes.
Oh, interesting. So not as a single unit.
Not initially. The idea was to stiffen the morale, as the sources put it, to bolster the standard citizen soldiers, the guys who weren't full-time pros. The band members were meant to be anchors, ensuring the guys next to them wouldn't break or run. They relied on the band's absolute refusal to retreat.
So they were like human linchpins in the citizen line.
Okay.
But the big shift, the moment they really became the legendary force we remember, that happens around 375 DCE, when command goes to General Pelopidas.
Yes, Pelopidas, a truly brilliant commander. He looked at Gorgidas' setup and basically thought, we're diluting their power. If their greatest strength is this incredible cohesion, this bond, this speed, why spread them out?
Right, concentrate the force.
Exactly. He unified the Sacred Band, pulled them all together into one single autonomous unit, designed specifically as shock troops.
Shock troops. So what does that mean in practice?
It means they weren't just there to boost morale anymore. They were the spearhead, the elite force held in reserve for the most critical moments. Targeted assaults, maybe hitting a specific weak point, smashing the enemy's best troops, or even a flank charge if needed, they became the decisive weapon.
That transition from being spread out as reinforcements to being this concentrated, specialized unit, that feels like a really important step in military thinking.
Oh, it's huge. It's an early recognition that you don't just throw your best troops randomly into the line. You deploy specialized professional units strategically to maximize their unique advantages in this case, both their skill and their psychological edge.
And the psychology seems key here.
Absolutely. Think about it. Gorgidas wanted 300 men to influence maybe 3,000 around them. Pelopidas understood something deeper, that those 300 men acting as one, driven by this incredibly powerful internal bond, could potentially defeat 3,000 men simply by shattering their command, breaking their will, causing panic.
It wasn't just about fighting better, but about focused psychological shock.
Precisely. And that demanded concentrating them, using them like a surgical instrument, not just mixing them in. This whole move state investment, continuous training, specialized roles, it really does pave the way for the kinds of professional armies Philip and Alexander of Macedon would later perfect and use to conquer the known world.
Okay, so we've got this professional elite unit, consolidated by Pelopidas into shock troops. But to really grasp why they had this legendary, unbreakable cohesion, we have to dig into the philosophy, the cultural context behind that structure. The fact that the Sacred Band deliberately built itself around the Greek custom of pederasty.
Yeah, and this sociological framework, it's absolutely central to who they were and why they worked. It's crucial, though, to understand it in its classical Greek context. We can't just slap a modern lens onto it.
Right, different times, different norms.
The unit was formally structured around this widely accepted social institution. Back then, it was often viewed primarily as a pedagogical relationship, a character building. You had the Erôs, the older man, usually an experienced warrior, who acted as mentor, role model, and lover.
And the Eromenos.
Paired with the Erômenos, the younger man, typically an adolescent or young adult, who was the trainee, the beloved.
So, within the Sacred Band, the veteran Erastes was providing constant one-on-one training, like a built-in mentorship program.
Exactly. It embedded the military essentially into this permanent, highly personal relationship. The veteran wasn't just teaching spear drills, he was passing on the entire military ethos, the code of honor, courage, discipline.
Total immersion.
Total immersion.
Yeah.
The practical application was seamless. The Aristides trained his younger partner on all the necessary combat skills. This ensured a consistently high level of competence right across the entire unit. You didn't have weak links because the training was so personalized and continuous.
And there was often a material side to this too, like with armor.
Yes, that's a fascinating detail. The mentorship was often cemented by a significant material investment. When a young man was formally inducted into the band, usually around age 20 or 21, his Erastes would frequently provide him with a full set of high-quality armor. Panoply.
Wow. So the armor itself, the tool of war, becomes this incredibly powerful symbol, a gift of love, status, commitment.
It transforms the equipment, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
not just state-issued gear. It's a visible sign of their shared bond, their mutual honor.
And that concept of honor to might was directly linked to the strategy, right? The idea of weaponizing shame, Eidos.
Absolutely. The Sacred Band was explicitly designed to weaponize the fear of disgrace. Eidos.
Okay, how does that work as military doctrine? We know armies based on family ties sometimes broke under pressure, Why did institutionalizing the specific emotional bond work so well? Isn't relying on emotion really risky in battle?
It seems counterintuitive, maybe, but it worked because this bond wasn't just incidental. It was chosen, it was formalized, it was even ritualized within the unit. That made the emotional stakes incredibly high. Much higher, arguably, than just fighting alongside your brother or cousin or fulfilling conscript duty.
Higher stakes.
The core strategic idea was simple but powerful. The fear of shaming yourself in front of your beloved, the fear of Erôs, was believed to be a far stronger, more immediate motivator than the natural fear of death.
Stronger than self-preservation.
That was the theory. And there was this intense bidirectional pressure to perform.
Okay, walk me through that bidirectional pressure. How did it work both ways?
Right. So if the Eromenos, the younger partner, showed any cowardice, any hesitation, faltered in the charge, that reflected terribly on the honor and the training ability of his Erastes. It meant the mentor had failed. His reputation was on the line.
So the older guy is judged by the younger guy's performance.
Exactly. And conversely, the Erastes, the veteran, had this profound moral obligation to be a shining example of courage. He absolutely could not retreat, break rank, or show fear in front of the person he loved and mentored. That would destroy the younger man's ideal of martial virtue, of what it meant to be a warrior.
They literally held each other's honor in their hands, and their lives, presumably.
Completely. Their fates were intertwined in the most intense way possible.
And this whole idea, this philosophy, it wasn't just made up after the fact. It was being discussed right around the time the band was formed.
Oh yeah, this wasn't a retroactive justification. It was the foundational philosophy. You look straight at Plato's Symposium. It was written around 380 BCE, give or take, right when Gorgidas is likely forming the band.
And what does Plato say?
Well, in the dialogue, the character Phaedrus makes exactly this argument. He says, look, an army made up entirely of lovers would be basically invincible. Why? Because out of shame, Platos, before their beloved, they would choose death over retreat. They'd sacrifice themselves rather than appear cowardly.
So Thebes took Plato's philosophical ideal for a hypothetical perfect army.
And they made it state policy. They built it. For real.
Wow. And this idea gets repeated. Parmenides, another Theban figure.
Yes, Parmenides' famous quote really nails it. He directly criticized the common practice of organizing army units by tribe or kinship.
Why? What was his argument?
He argued that those traditional bonds, family, tribe, they're often compulsory, maybe a bit diffuse, and they can crumble under the extreme stress and chaos of battle. But, he claimed, and this is the key part, a band cemented by friendship, grounded upon love, is never to be broken and invincible.
That's pretty explicit. Love is stronger than blood in battle.
That's the claim. It's a direct declaration. This chosen, institutionalized emotional commitment creates a superior, more reliable bond for high-stakes combat than traditional loyalty structures.
And we have stories, anecdotes that seem to illustrate just how extreme this commitment could be, where shame truly was worse than death.
Plutarch gives us that really visceral, almost disturbing anecdote. A sacred band soldier is wounded, surrounded by the enemy. He knows he's done for.
Right.
Instead of trying to run and getting stabbed in the back, the ultimate mark of a coward in Greek warfare, he supposedly asks his enemy to stab him through the chest, facing forward.
Why?
His explicit reason. So that his lover, finding his body later, would not have to blush seeing him wounded in a dishonorable way, struck down while fleeing.
That's intense. He's prioritizing his partner's perception of his honor over his own survival, even his final moments of pain.
That's the power of Erôs in action. That's the level of commitment the system was designed to foster.
It goes way beyond just professional duty. It's like this institutionalized spiritual, emotional contract, which explains the name, right? Hieros Lochos, the Sacred Band.
Exactly. The name sacred comes directly from this profound, almost consecrated emotional basis. Plutarch points out that Plato himself had called a lover a divine friend. It suggests this bond elevated the unit, made it something more than just another military company.
So Thebes institutionalized this deep emotional connection, leveraged it, and got unparalleled unit cohesion and martial virtue, areto, a total fusion of society, philosophy, and military strategy.
A unique and, for a time, incredibly successful fusion.
Okay, so the philosophy is clear. They're fighting for honor, for their partner, driven by Erôs. But philosophy alone doesn't win battles. This still had to be a physically elite unit. How did they actually forge these guys into top-tier warriors? It wasn't just a random draft, right? Highly selective.
Absolutely selective and professional. These weren't your average citizen soldiers called up for the summer campaign season and then sent back to their farms.
Full-time job.
Pretty much. Members were typically brought in around age 20 or 21, and they served continuously, likely until their early 30s or so. This meant they were focused entirely on military performance during their absolute peak physical and mental years.
And the whole Erastes Romanos thing played into the training consistency.
Hugely. That pairing system guaranteed that the transmission of skills, tactics, and the unit ethos was immediate, personalized, and consistently high quality. You avoided the ups and downs in skill level that you'd get with armies relying on annual citizen call-ups and less formal training. Every recruit had a dedicated, experienced mentor.
So what did the actual training look like day to day? Heavy infantry in a phalanx needs more than just strength. It needs, like, perfect synchronization.
Right. Synchronization and unit cohesion were the absolute focus. Discipline, of course, came from regular drilling with the weapons, the Dori spear, the Aspa shield, the Zepho sword. But crucially, their regimen included a lot of rigorous hoplite wrestling.
Wrestling? Why wrestling specifically?
Well, it builds strength, stamina, close quarters fighting skills, but more than that, wrestling in groups and also specialized dance exercises they reportedly did. These weren't just for fun or basic fitness.
Yet a tactical purpose.
Definitely. These communal physical activities were vital for developing rhythm, coordination, and that sense of mass movement, moving together as one block, essential for keeping a phalanx tight, flexible, and functional under the incredible stress of battle.
Yeah, I can see that. In a phalanx, if one guy is out of step, pushes too hard, or hangs back, the whole formation could just fall apart. They had to move like a single organism.
Exactly. The training aimed to instill what the Greeks called sympathia, this shared feeling, almost a shared vulnerability, that translates directly into physical coordination on the battlefield. Shield to shield, you need to anticipate the guy next to you, move with him instinctively.
And there's speculation about other skills, too. Cavalry.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Given that Gorgidas, the founder, had previously served as a hipparch, that's a cavalry commander, many historians think it's pretty likely the Sacred Band members also received some level of equestrian training.
So not just infantry.
Probably not just infantry. It suggests they might have been a more well-rounded elite force than sometimes assumed. Maybe capable of rapid deployment, scouting, or even dismounted action after riding close to the battle. It points to a really high-level adaptable skill set, far beyond the standard hoplite.
Okay, this inevitably brings us back to the big comparison. Sparta. Sparta had the Agio, that famously brutal, lifelong state conditioning program starting practically from birth. Thebes creates the Sacred Band with basically formalized adult training, yet sources say they achieved discipline that was comparable, maybe even superior. How did they shortcut decades of Spartan brainwashing, essentially?
That's really the core of their military innovation, isn't it? The Theban approach was this unique synthesis. They combined elite, focused adult training with that incredibly powerful psychological engine, the emotional commitment of the bond.
So the bond replaced the lifelong conditioning.
In a way, yes. They didn't need decades of state control because the eidos, the fear of shame before their lover, provided instant, almost unbreakable compliance and motivation. Spartan discipline was largely external, imposed by the state system. The Sacred Band's cohesion was internal, driven by personal honor and love. And that fusion, that sympathy under pressure, seems to have been, in practice, often superior even to the Spartans' rigid institutional obedience.
So once Pelopidas took command, consolidated them around 375 BCE, what became their specific job on the battlefield? What did shock trips mean for them?
Their job was to be the hammer, the line breakers. Their primary tactical function was to operate in that tight, close order formation and lead the charge, usually a frontal assault, designed specifically to smash through the enemy's line, break their cohesion, and create panic.
The tip of the spear?
Exactly. They were held back for the decisive moment, the point where the battle would be won or lost. Their training, their cohesion, their motivation, it meant they could handle the intense friction, the chaos of that critical clash better than anyone else.
And they proved this worked pretty much right away at the Battle of Chaeronea.
Yes, Chaeronea, around 375 BCE. That was their first major independent test under Pelopidas. And it was a stunner. Pelopidas led the Sacred Band, just the 300 of them, plus maybe some supporting cavalry, against a significantly larger Spartan force, maybe outnumbered 2-1. And the Sacred Band won, decisively. They didn't just hold their ground, they routed the Spartans. This victory sent shockwaves across Greece. It was the first time in a long time a Spartan force had been beaten in a straight-up infantry fight by a smaller enemy force.
So Chaeronea established their reputation, made people realize this wasn't just some philosophical experiment.
Absolutely. Tegira proved, unequivocally, that their unique structure wasn't just theory. It was a powerful tactical multiplier. It demonstrated that this intense cohesion could overcome numerical disadvantage. They were now a proven, terrifying military asset.
Okay, Tegira put them on the map. Big time. But the battle that really defines the Sacred Band, their absolute military peak, has to be Leuctra in 371 BCE. This wasn't just another win for Thebes. This battle fundamentally reshaped the entire Greek world. It ended Spartan dominance basically overnight.
Leuctra is absolutely a watershed moment, not just for Thebes, but for military history in general. And it's largely down to the genius of the Theban general Epaminondas, the overall commander.
With Pelopidas still leading the Sacred Band directly.
Yes. Pelopidas was commanding the band, executing Epaminondas' radical plan. And the band wasn't just part of the plan. They were the absolute linchpin. They were the critical component in a revolutionary, incredibly high-risk tactical innovation.
And that innovation is the famous Oblique Phalanx. Okay, for someone who doesn't study ancient battles, break that down. How was this different from how hoplite battles usually went? And why did Epaminondas feel he needed to do something so drastic?
Right. For centuries, the standard way to fight a hoplite battle was pretty straightforward. You lined up your phalanx, usually maybe 8 to 12 shields deep, in a long, relatively even line. And crucially, you always put your best troops on the right flank.
Why the right flank?
Because the shield, aspis, was carried on the left arm, leaving the right side of each soldier relatively exposed. So the right flank of the whole army was the position of honor and also the point of greatest potential impact. Both sides would stack their best guys on their right, leading to this clash of elites. Epaminondas knew the Spartans' right flank, where their king and their best warriors always fought, was incredibly strong. Probably unbeatable head-on with a standard formation.
So a normal fight matching strength for strength wasn't going to work.
He figured it was suicide. So instead of a balanced line, he decided to unbalance his own line deliberately, massively. He concentrated almost all his hitting power onto one single point.
Ow!
He took his left wing, the side that would directly face the elite Spartan right, and he stacked it to an absolutely extraordinary depth. Sources suggest maybe 50 shields deep.
50 deep, that's insane.
It's almost unbelievable. Picture it. Not a wide line, but this incredibly dense, thick column of men, 50 ranks deep. It was designed to function like a massive battering ram. Just punch through the Spartan line at that one critical point through sheer mass and momentum.
Okay, but that sounds incredibly risky. If you make one wing 50 deep, what happens to the rest of your army? Your center and your right wing must have been incredibly thin, incredibly weak.
Exactly. That's the gamble. The Theban center and right were deliberately weakened, probably refused battle or advanced very slowly. They were incredibly vulnerable if the Spartans could wheel around and hit them.
So the whole plan depended on that left wing hitting hard and fast.
Absolutely. It was a calculated risk, but Epaminondas was counting on speed and shock. The idea was that this super deep left wing would crash through the Spartan right flank so quickly, so decisively, that it would essentially win the battle before the rest of the Spartan army even had time to react and exploit the weakness on the Theban right.
Speed and guaranteed penetration were everything if that spearhead stalled.
The whole Theban army collapses. Total disaster. It was all or nothing.
And this is where the Sacred Band comes in. Where exactly did Epaminondas put them in this crazy 50-deep formation?
Right at the very front. They were the spearhead, the absolute leading edge of that massive column.
Wow. So they had the job of making first contact, breaking the Spartan line, and ensuring that irresistible forward momentum.
Yes. That position demanded guaranteed, unstoppable forward drive. It required a unit that would not hesitate, would not buckle under the pressure of hitting the world's most feared infantry head-on. It was the highest risk, highest honor position on the field. Epaminondas was literally betting the entire future of Thebes on the unwavering commitment of those 300 men.
So describe the collision. The 50-deep Theban left, led by the Sacred Band, slams into the elite Spartan right. What happened?
It was the decisive moment of the battle. The sheer depth of the Theban column provided immense weight and momentum. But it was the quality of the troops at the point of impact that truly mattered. The Sacred Band, driven by their unique combination of elite training, discipline, and that intense emotional cohesion, they hit the Spartans like a thunderbolt.
And the Spartans.
The Spartans were stunned. They were used to enemies eventually giving way. But the Sacred Band didn't yield. They absorbed the shock, and then, through sheer ferocity and perfect coordination, they began to push the Spartans back. They managed to completely overpower, break, and essentially annihilate their elite Spartan counterparts in that crucial sector. The Spartan king, Cleombrotus, was killed right there in the fighting.
They broke the unbreakable Spartan line. That wasn't just a tactical win. It must have been psychologically devastating for the Spartans.
Catastrophic. The Sacred Band achieved what most Greeks thought was impossible. They beat the Spartans, man for man, in open battle. And not just beat them, but shattered their elite core.
So Leuctra becomes the ultimate proof of concept for the Sacred Band's philosophy.
Absolutely, it validates everything. The victory demonstrates that this unique blend, the psychological power of the lover's bond, fused with top-tier professional training, created a fighting force superior even to the legendary Spartan system. Only a unit with that kind of guaranteed internal commitment could have pulled off Epaminondas's incredibly risky maneuver against the best infantry in the world.
And the result.
Leuctra permanently shattered the myth of Spartan invincibility. It wasn't just a military defeat, it broke their aura, and it directly led to the albeit short-lived period of Theban hegemony, where Thebes became the dominant power in Greece. The Sacred Band had proven their worth on the biggest stage imaginable.
So Leuctra was the absolute peak. Thebes is on top, the Sacred Band is legendary, but that dominance, as you said, was incredibly brief. Fast forward about 33 years to 338 BCE, and the whole picture has changed. There's a new power rising, much bigger, much more dangerous. Not another Greek city-state, but Macedon from the north, led by King Philip II.
Yeah, the whole game changed. The era of the independent Greek polis, these fierce little city-states constantly vying for power, that whole system was coming to a violent end. Philip II wasn't playing by the old rules.
He had a different kind of army.
A fundamentally different kind. A truly professional national army, loyal to him, not just a city. And crucially, he employed advanced combined arms strategy and new military technology. The hoplite system, even the perfected version embodied by the Sacred Band, was suddenly facing, well, obsolescence. Strategic obsolescence.
Okay, let's talk about the technology first. Philip's army is famous for the sarissa, the long pike. How did that weapon fundamentally change things and threaten the Sacred Band's whole way of fighting?
The difference was reach, pure and simple. Your traditional Greek hoplite, like the members of the Sacred Band, fought with the dory. A spear, maybe 8-9 feet long, good for close-end, shield-to-shield fighting, shock combat.
Right, get close, push, stab.
Exactly. The Macedonian sarissa, however, was this enormous pike. We're talking 18, maybe even 22 feet long, held two-handed. Now imagine a Macedonian phalanx, typically formed 16 ranks deep. Because the sarissa was so long, the spear points of the first 5 ranks could all project out beyond the front rank of soldiers.
Whoa, so it's like a giant hedgehog of spear points sticking out way further than a hoplite spear could reach.
Precisely. A dense, deadly thicket of spear points extending maybe 10-12 feet in front of the first man. This meant that the Sacred Band, trained for that close-quarters shock, trained to get in fast and break the enemy line. They couldn't even get close enough to use their shorter spears effectively.
They couldn't engage in their preferred style of fighting.
They couldn't close the distance. The sarissa wall kept them at bay. It basically neutralized the traditional hoplite charge and made those frontal assaults incredibly difficult and bloody, if not totally impossible. It rendered the dory and the tactics built around it almost obsolete overnight.
Okay, so the tech is against them. The final showdown comes at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BCE. It's Philip's Macedonians against a coalition of Greek states, mainly Athens and Thebes, trying to resist Macedonian dominance.
That's the setup. Philip had a huge army, maybe 30,000 infantry, mostly armed with the sarissa, and importantly, about 2,000 elite companion cavalry. His strategy wasn't just about lining up and pushing anymore. It was far more sophisticated. Combined arms, using infantry and cavalry together in a coordinated way.
So what was Philip's big move at Chaeronea? How did he break the Greek line?
It was clever and ruthless. Sources suggest Philip commanded his own wing, facing the Athenians. He might have executed a feigned retreat, or perhaps just held his line very steady while applying pressure elsewhere. The key result was that the Athenians pushed forward aggressively, maybe thinking they were winning.
But that stretched the Greek line.
Exactly. Fatally separated the eager Athenians from their Theban ally stationed next to them in the line. It opened up a gap, a catastrophic gap in the center left of the Allied formation.
And that gap was the target.
That was the kill zone. Philip had his elite companion cavalry, commanded by his incredibly talented 18-year-old son, Alexander.
Later Alexander the Great.
The very same. Alexander saw the gap open, and he led a devastating charge right into that exposed flank, smashing into the hinge between the Athenians and Thebans. It completely shattered the cohesion of the Greek army.
Classic combined arms. Infantry pins the enemy, cavalry delivers the decisive blow to the weak point.
Textbook. And brutally effective. The Athenian flank crumpled, many fled. But the Sacred Band, positioned over on the Theban flank, probably facing the core of the Macedonian phalanx, they did exactly what their ethos demanded.
They didn't run.
They didn't budge. That's the incredible paradox of their end. The battle is lost all around them, the Allied line is broken, Athenians are scattering. But the Sacred Band, recognized even by their enemies as arguably the finest heavy infantry unit in the world at that point, they remained steadfast. They refused to break formation.
Even when isolated, surrounded, facing the Sarissas and Alexander's cavalry.
Even then, they fought where they stood, to the last man.
They chose annihilation over dishonor, the absolute final expression of their core principle.
It was the ultimate fulfillment of Erôs. To flee would have been the ultimate disgrace, destroying the honor of every single pair, the legacy of the entire unit. Plutarch's account is chilling. He says, they were all found lying dead together in their ranks, right where they made their stand. They refused to yield an inch.
Their courage was absolute, but it wasn't enough against the new way of war.
Exactly. Their unwavering commitment, the very thing that made them invincible against the Spartans at Leuctra, couldn't overcome the technological advantage of the Sarissa and the superior combined arms strategy of the Macedonians.
And this final stand, this incredible display of doomed courage, it even moved their conqueror, Philip II. There's that famous story.
Yeah, it's a very moving anecdote from Plutarch. After the battle, Philip was surveying the field. He was a hardened general, used to bloodshed. But he came upon the place where these 300 Thebans lay dead, together, still almost in formation.
And he realized who they were.
When he learned that this was the famous Sacred Band, the Band of Lovers, he supposedly broke down and wept. It wasn't just professional respect for a tough enemy. It seems to have been genuine awe at the depth of their commitment, the power of the bond that led them to choose death together over survival and disgrace.
And he made that famous declaration.
His declaration is the ultimate tribute from a victor. He reportedly said, "Perish any man who suspects that these men either did or suffered anything base." Basically, let no one dare suggest these men did anything shameful or were victims of anything shameful. He recognized the profound honor in their suicidal stand.
It perfectly captures the paradox, doesn't it? Their complete commitment to their philosophy led directly to their obliteration.
Absolutely. Their perfect execution of their code meant their total destruction. The discipline that crushed Sparta was simply overwhelmed by a superior military system. Their annihilation wasn't just the end of a unit, it symbolized the end of the entire military era of the independent Greek polis. Their courage was magnificent, but the world had moved on.
So, the Sacred Band, Thebes' elite fighting force, is wiped out at Chaeronea. Their military story ends there. But their memory, their legacy of valor, that was immediate and powerful. And it has a very tangible marker, the Lion of Chaeronea.
Right, the Lion Monument, this massive marble statue, eventually reconstructed in the 19th century, that was erected right there at the burial site of the Sacred Band. It's an incredibly powerful statement.
Erected by the Thebans themselves, even after such a crushing defeat.
Yes, that's what the historian Pausanias tells us. The Thebans chose to memorialize their fallen elite, casting this utter disaster not as a moment of failure, but as a profound act of collective martyrdom. They commemorated the courage of the unit that refused to break, rather than dwelling on the political consequences of the loss. The lion became a symbol of their ultimate sacrifice.
But what makes the Sacred Band's story perhaps unique among ancient military units is that we have more than just literary accounts and a monument. We have archaeological proof that seems to back up the legend, right? Found beneath the lion itself.
Exactly. This is where the story gets really solid, really tangible. Excavations under the Lion Monument, particularly those in the late 19th century, uncovered a mass grave, a polyandrion.
Now, what did they find in the grave?
They found the skeletal remains of 254 men, buried together.
254 out of 300? That's incredibly high.
It's an astonishingly high number. Finding 254 bodies out of a unit strength of 300 provides incredibly strong support for those literary accounts, like Plutarch's, that claim the band fought virtually to the last man. It suggests very few surrendered or managed to flee. They really did stand and die together.
So the body count itself testifies to their commitment. It wasn't just heroic exaggeration in the stories.
It seems not. The archaeology provides powerful corroboration, and further analysis of the remains confirmed they were adult males, with ages ranging roughly from late teen 20s up to maybe their 40s, which fits perfectly with what we'd expect for the demographics of an elite professional unit like the Sacred Band. It cemented the identification of the grave.
And then there's that incredibly evocative detail, the description from the original excavation reports. Something about how some of the skeletons were found.
Yes, that's perhaps the most poignant piece of evidence. Descriptive accounts from the time of the discovery mention that some pairs of skeletons were found with their arms interlinked, perhaps around the shoulders or elbows.
Arms linked. In death.
That's the description. Now, we have to be careful with older excavation reports, but if accurate, imagine that. It's this visceral, physical manifestation of the bond, of the camaraderie and affection right there in their final moments. Soldiers choosing to die, literally, side by side, physically connected as they were overwhelmed. It makes the whole philosophical concept of the lover's bond startlingly real, tangible in the bones themselves.
Wow, that's incredibly powerful. Okay, stepping back from the gravesite to the bigger picture, Chaeronea wasn't just the end of the Sacred Band, it was effectively the end of an era for all of Greece.
It really was the turning point. The annihilation of Thebes' best troops, combined with the defeat of Athens, marked the definitive end of meaningful independence for the major Greek city-states. It ushered in Macedonian dominance, which then paved the way for the larger Hellenistic kingdoms and eventually Roman conquest. The old political structures were broken.
And Macedon made sure they stayed broken. Thebes tried to revolt later.
They did. A few years after Chaeronea, following Philip II's assassination, Thebes saw an opportunity and rebelled against Macedonian control. It was a fatal mistake.
Alexander's response.
Alexander the Great, now king, responded with absolute terrifying brutality. In 335 BCE, besieged Thebes, stormed it, and then systematically destroyed the city, razed it to the ground. Thousands were killed, and the surviving population, tens of thousands, were sold into slavery.
Just wiped off the map.
Pretty much. It was a brutal message to the rest of Greece. Resistance is futile. This act ensured that the classical polis system, the independent city-state model that had defined Greek civilization for centuries, was well and truly over as the primary political force in the region. So the fate of the Sacred Band at Chaeronea wasn't just a military loss. It was inextricably tied to the death of Greek liberty itself. They were, in a way, the ultimate expression of the polis's potential, and their destruction signaled its end. Hashtag 10-7. Conclusion and final thought.
So, when you put it all together, the story of the Sacred Band of Thebes is just unique. A really singular phenomenon in military history. They took a specific social practice, this formalized pederasty, and successfully translated it into a potent military doctrine. Something nobody else seems to have done quite like that.
Yeah, their military value was groundbreaking because it wasn't primarily based on having more men or better tech initially. It was based on achieving near-perfect psychological reliability on the battlefield.
Through that combination of professional training and the power of Erôs.
Exactly. That institutionalized emotional accountability allowed them to function as these incredibly effective shock troops. They could execute risky, innovative tactics like Epaminondas's Oblique Phalanx at Leuctra, tactics that demanded absolute trust and commitment, and they proved devastatingly effective, even against the mighty Spartans.
But their ending is just this stark, unavoidable paradox. They reached the absolute peak of psychological mastery, they perfected the hoplite system. You could argue they were the greatest hoplite unit ever.
A strong case could be made, yeah.
And yet they were completely undone by military evolution. Technology and strategy just leapfrogged them.
Their annihilation at Chaeronea wasn't a failure of their spirit or their discipline. All the evidence points to their courage being absolute right to the very end. But it was this brutal lesson that even the most profound emotional commitment, the most sacred bond, the most perfected system of its type, ultimately couldn't stop the march of military innovation. The Sarissa combined arms. It was just a different, more lethal game.
They were the best of the old world facing the dawn of the new. And the new world simply had better weapons and a better playbook.
That's a good way to put it. Chaeronea, 338 BCE, the destruction of the Sacred Band. It really feels like the moment the idealized courage and the unique philosophical structure of the independent Greek polis finally met something it couldn't overcome. The professionalized, expansionist military machine of the Hellenistic monarchies.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with maybe a final thought to chew on. We tend to focus so much today on technology, data, logistics when we think about what makes organizations effective, especially in high-stakes fields.
Military emergency services, even business sometimes.
Right. But the Sacred Band's story forces us to ask, what modern institutions, what teams today still fundamentally rely not just on tech or process, but on those deep, non-technological bonds? intense personal loyalty, shared vulnerability, maybe that same sense of profound personal accountability that Eidos to achieve their mission, especially when things get incredibly tough, when failure isn't an option.
It's a great question. Because the enduring legacy of the Hieros Lochos is that powerful proof. That shared emotional purpose, that deep human connection, it can be forged into one of the most powerful forces, one of the most effective weapons in history. But as their story also shows, it can be tragically fragile in the face of overwhelming change.